Hi, you're on the Reddit Confessions channel. The wall clock in our hallway froze at 3:04 a.m. No ticking, no motion, just that moment, suspended in silence, etched into my memory like a scar. I didn't notice it right away. I only realized it later after everything collapsed. But now, looking back, it feels poetic because that was the exact minute she walked through the door with smeared mascara, a blank stare, and the smell of someone else's cologne wrapped around her like fog. That day had been quiet, too quiet. She didn't text me, not once, not even a sarcastic meme or a tired working late again. I sat in our kitchen scrolling through my phone with the screen brightness turned down low, listening to the hum of the fridge like it might offer answers. It was our anniversary. I didn't remind her. She'd said the week before that she was too busy to remember every little thing. So I decided to test that theory. Not to be petty, not to trap her. I just wanted to know. At 7:46 p.m., I lit a candle at the table. Just one. I didn't cook, didn't try to make anything special. I just sat there in silence, watching the wax melt and wondering how love turns invisible. By 11, the candle had burned out. By midnight, the wine I poured for two was still untouched, except by me. By 1:30, I wasn't angry. I was hollow. And then came 3:04. I heard the keys hit the door like she was surprised they worked. She didn't rush in. She didn't apologize. She didn't even look at me. She just sighed, kicked off her heels, and mumbled it. I had more important things. Those 4 words, as if I were a chore she had to remember to resent. She walked straight past me, her perfume trailing lies, and I sat there frozen like the damn clock. What she didn't know was that while she was out doing important things, I had already printed my exit plan, bank account details, rental listings, my name scratched off our lease. By morning, I was gone. No note, no message, no dramatic goodbye, just that clock still stuck at 3:04. By the time the sun started bleeding through the blinds, I had packed a bag I didn't know I'd been mentally packing for months. I didn't rush. I folded my clothes like I always do. Boring, deliberate, quiet. No theatrics, just fabric and a growing ache in my ribs. I moved through the house like a ghost, noticing things I had ignored for years. The dusty corner of her vanity mirror, the chipped tile near the front door, the photo of us at Lake Windeer, still crooked in its frame, just like everything else. That photo haunted me, not because we looked happy in it, but because of the man in it. I barely recognized him anymore. The smile wasn't fake, just naive. He had no idea what years of being ignored would do to him. He didn't yet understand what it's like to sit across the table from someone who looks through you like you're static. I stared at that picture longer than I should have, wondering when I stopped being a person and started being furniture. At 6:17 a.m., I unlocked my phone and opened the note I'd been rewriting in my head for weeks. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want drama. I wanted release. But nothing I wrote sounded right. You broke me. Too dramatic. I deserved better. I didn't believe it. So instead, I typed 5 words and left it on the kitchen counter. I was never your priority. She didn't stir, not even as I closed the bedroom door behind me. I stood in the hallway a moment longer, watching her sleep on my side of the bed, curled up like a child who had never lied. The irony burned. I wanted to wake her, not to fight, but just to ask, who did I become in your story? A background character? A safety net? Or just some weak man too scared to leave? Well, here I was, leaving. But fate is cruel because as I grabbed my keys, her phone, left charging by the microwave, lit up with a message. I didn't mean to look, but my name was in it. Or at least what used to be my name. The message read, Daryl still doesn't suspect anything. Last night was risky, but worth it. My chest tightened like a vice. I stared at the screen. There was no emoji, no playful tone, just blunt, unapologetic words. I opened the message thread without thinking. The contact name was Work Lunch Fork Knife with Plate. Cowardly, lazy, transparent, and there it was. Weeks of messages, some suggestive, some cruel, and one photo, a blurry one taken at the bar I once proposed to her in. She was laughing, her hand on another man's knee. My gut twisted like a bad dream, except I wasn't waking up. So much made sense now. The distant look in her eyes, the sudden interest in Pilates at 8 p.m., the perfume she never used to wear. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I just changed. In that instant, something cracked inside me, and I wasn't sure if it was the end of love or just the final illusion snapping in two. I took one last look at the kitchen, the place where I once imagined a family, a future, a forever, and I walked out, not knowing where I'd go, only knowing I wouldn't come back. But the story doesn't end there, because when someone thinks you're weak, they never expect what comes next. By noon that day, I was holed up in a small roadside motel 2 towns away, the kind with peeling floral curtains and a TV bolted to the dresser. I hadn't slept, I hadn't eaten. I just sat on the edge of the bed staring at my phone like it might explode. I kept waiting for it to light up, for her name to pop up, a call, a message, something, but nothing came. She didn't call, she posted. I hadn't unfollowed her yet. I don't even know why I checked. Maybe I hoped she'd be broken. Maybe I needed to see regret. But instead, I saw a boomerang of her clinking wine glasses with some coworkers, her caption reading, "Nothing more refreshing than cutting off what no longer serves you, conquer nail polish." No mention of me, no anniversary, just vibes, lipstick, and fake freedom. And in the background, half obscured, was a man's hand, familiar, tanned, a tiny tattoo near the wrist. I zoomed in. My throat dried up. That same tattoo was in the blurry bar photo I found on her phone. That was him. That was Beau. I gripped the phone so hard I thought I'd crack it, not because she moved on. That part didn't even surprise me anymore, but because she was never even there. Not mentally, not emotionally. She'd left our marriage long before I ever packed my bag. By 3 p.m., I opened my email. I don't know what I was expecting. Maybe something from her. Instead, I found an unread message from our shared financial advisor. It was titled, "Joint Investment Account Access Change." I blinked. I clicked. The message said she had changed the security questions and removed my contact as secondary. My name gone. She didn't just cheat emotionally. She was scrubbing me from the books. I felt stupid. Beyond stupid. I had trusted her with everything. Accounts, passwords, documents. She used my trust like wallpaper. Pretty when needed, but easy to peel off when she got bored. So I did something out of character. I forwarded the message to myself, then called the advisor directly. My voice cracked like I was 13 again. I told him I wanted statements. I wanted details. I wanted to see exactly when this started. He hesitated. Then he said the worst sentence I've ever heard. "Looks like these changes began 4 months ago." She had already been preparing for a life without me, while I was still making her morning coffee, still asking about her day, still walking on eggshells, thinking I was the problem. I hung up and stared at myself in the motel mirror. I looked like a wreck. My hair was a mess, my eyes sunken. I hadn't shaved. I looked like someone who had been erased by someone he loved. That night, I opened the drawer next to the bed and found a Gideon Bible. I didn't open it, but I left my wedding ring inside it. Not for religious reasons, just because it felt like the only safe place left. And as I laid back on the bed, listening to the sound of the refrigerator buzzing louder than my thoughts, I realized something chilling. She was expecting me to disappear, but maybe it was time I stopped being predictable. It was nearly midnight again when I found myself parked 3 houses down from our place. Engine off, hands shaking on the steering wheel. I wasn't supposed to be there. I had left. I had promised myself I wouldn't turn back. But there was one thing I hadn't taken with me, and it had been clawing at my mind nonstop. The external hard drive. Not romantic, I know, but that drive held everything. Our tax records, a decade of scanned documents, her medical history, my old family photos, even a digital copy of my father's voice from a voicemail I never deleted. When I packed, I overlooked it. And the sickest part, I almost convinced myself she wouldn't even notice it was gone. So there I was, outside my own home like some creep, waiting for the lights to go out. I watched through the slats of my hoodie as her bedroom finally dimmed. Then I waited another 20 minutes. I wasn't scared of her. I was scared of me. What I might say if I saw her, what I might feel, or worse, if I felt nothing at all. I crept up the side of the house like a teenager, trying not to get caught sneaking in. I still had my key. She hadn't changed the locks. Either she hadn't noticed I was gone or she was so sure I'd come crawling back that she didn't bother. I unlocked the door without a sound and slid inside. Everything was the same and yet completely alien. The couch still had my dent in it. My jacket was still hanging by the door, and there on the coffee table was a half-drunk glass of wine and a man's lighter. It wasn't mine. I froze. I could hear my own heartbeat echoing in my head. The house smelled like him now, a sharp, musky cologne I never wore. I felt like I was breathing someone else's air in my own home, but I didn't touch anything. I made my way quietly to the office, grabbed the hard drive, and shoved it into my bag, and that's when I noticed the envelope on the desk. It had my name on it. Not Daryl, not Baby, just you. I shouldn't have opened it, but of course I did. Inside were 2 folded papers. One was a printed screenshot of my bank transfer. When I pulled half our savings before leaving, she had written in red pen. Didn't even have the guts to talk. And the second sheet, a list. It looked like a to-do list, but half the items were terrifying. Cancel joint card, white heavy check mark. Lawyer consultation, white heavy check mark. Get ahead of story, white large square. Prep emotional abuse angle, white large square. I sat down. I actually sat down. My niece couldn't hold me. She wasn't just moving on. She was plotting something, painting me as the villain, getting her version ready before I even had the chance to breathe. My wife, the woman I once begged to go to counseling, was rehearsing a narrative, and I had walked straight into it. I should have left right then, but something made me walk to the bedroom door. I opened it just a crack. She was asleep, alone, on my side of the bed, holding her phone in her hand like a safety blanket. Even in sleep, she looked distant, cold. I wondered who she was texting before her eyes shut. I didn't wake her. I just whispered the most honest thing I'd ever said in our entire marriage. You win. Then I left. This time I locked the door from the outside. I didn't sleep that night. I drove aimlessly through the outskirts of town with no GPS, no destination, just headlights cutting through the dark and my mind spinning in circles. Every time I blinked, I saw that list again. Emotional abuse angle circled in ink like a punchline to a joke where I was the clown. She was getting ahead of the story, and what was my story? What would I even say? My wife cheated and made me feel like wallpaper. Who would care? At a gas station near Pine Hollow, I parked and sat in the car for nearly 40 minutes. A trucker walked by and glanced at me like he was deciding whether to call someone. I must have looked insane, pale, wide-eyed, still gripping the hard drive like it was a weapon. And maybe it was because inside it were 10 years of proof. Not just documents and tax forms, but photos, voicemails, videos of us. Or rather, me trying and her retreating, me planning things, her canceling them, me asking, her shrugging. I didn't just want to leave anymore. I wanted the truth. Not for revenge, not to win, but to exist. I didn't want her to erase me with a rehearsed story and a lawyer who only heard one side. She could cheat, she could lie, but she couldn't rewrite me, not without a fight. So I made a copy of everything on the drive. One for me, one for my lawyer. Yes, I finally got one. A woman named Marn with the voice of a chainsaw and zero patience for drama. I liked her immediately. I told her everything. I left nothing out. Even the parts that made me look weak, especially those parts. She didn't flinch. She said, "We're not here to win pretty. We're here to stop you from getting steamrolled." The next 72 hours blurred together. I stayed off the radar. No contact with Tessa, no social media. Marn told me not to respond to anything if she reached out. And sure enough, on day 3, my phone buzzed. Not a message, a tag. Tessa had posted a photo of our wedding ring set in a puddle with the caption, Healing starts with goodbye, broken heart. I stared at it for a long time, not because I cared about the post, but because of the comments her friends, people I used to barbecue with, were flooding it with hearts and comments like, "So proud of you for getting out, and you deserve peace." One even wrote, "He was always too intense." Anyway, I wasn't mad. I was embarrassed. She was beating me at my own silence. But her plan had one flaw: me. I hadn't burned down. I'd adapted. I wasn't the shattered version of myself sitting in that motel anymore. I was watching, collecting, building. Not to destroy her, but to protect myself, to ensure that the last thing she ever took from me was me. That night I drafted my own post. Just a black screen, one sentence. Sometimes silence isn't peace, it's survival. I didn't tag her. I didn't name her. I didn't even respond to the messages it brought in. But I knew she saw it. How? Because less than an hour later she called. I didn't answer. She texted. I didn't read it. Instead, I turned off my phone, laid back on the thin motel mattress, and let myself smile for the first time in weeks. Because now, finally, I wasn't chasing her. She was chasing me. It was raining when she showed up. Not the dramatic thunderstorm kind, just that cold, drizzly type that makes everything feel heavier. I heard the knock before I even looked through the window for soft taps, like she wasn't sure if she should be there, like she expected me not to answer, which in all fairness, I almost didn't. I stood behind the curtain and watched her. She didn't have an umbrella, just her hoodie pulled up, soaked through. She wasn't crying, not visibly, but she looked different, smaller, like someone had finally told her a truth she wasn't ready to hear. I didn't open the door right away. I just stood there and let the seconds drag. She knocked again, this time more firmly. "Daryl," she called out, her voice muffled through the rain. "I know you're in there." Yeah, of course she knew. She always knew where I'd go when things got too hard. That's the thing about people like her. They count on you being predictable. I finally cracked the door open. Not wide, just enough to see her eyes. They looked tired, not guilty, not apologetic, just inconvenienced. "Can I come in?" she asked like it was her right. "Why?" I asked. She blinked, caught off guard by the question. Not because it was harsh, but because it was honest. She was used to me letting her in without conditions, used to me making space even when she gave me none. "I think we should talk," she said. I opened the door all the way, then stepped aside without a word. She walked in slowly, her eyes scanning the motel room like it was too low for her. She was still in her designer jeans and expensive boots, like she came straight from pretending her life was fine. She sat down on the edge of the bed without asking. Typical. "I've been thinking," she started, hands folded in her lap, "about everything." I stayed quiet. I didn't sit. I stood across from her, arms crossed, waiting for the point. "I know I've made mistakes," she continued. "But what you did, just leaving, pulling the money, disappearing, that was cruel, Daryl. You blindsided me." I almost laughed. Blindsided her? "I didn't cheat," she added quickly. Like getting that on the record was more important than fixing anything. I mean, yes, there was someone I talked to, someone I maybe got close to, but I never actually did anything. You don't have proof of anything beyond that. There it was, the rehearsed line, the version she was ready to spin in court, to her friends, to her family. Her voice was calm, calculated, like she was already halfway through her performance. I didn't respond. "I think we both needed space," she said, softening her tone. "Maybe we can figure this out. I'm not saying things weren't broken, but we owe it to ourselves too." "You printed a plan," I said, finally cutting in. "You sat down and planned how to ruin me if I reacted." Her mouth parted slightly. She wasn't expecting that. Not yet. "You wrote down an entire narrative about how you'd frame me," I said. "Emotional abuse angle. You called me intense. You wanted to turn my pain into ammunition." Her face shifted, subtle but real, the way liars look when the lights come on. "You went through my stuff," she whispered, like that was the violation. "You left it out," I said. like you wanted me to find it. She stood up slowly, her body tense, defensive. You're twisting this. You always twist things. There it was again. The angle, the gaslight. But this time I didn't take the bait. I walked to the door and held it open. You showed up because you thought I'd forgive you before you needed to lie in court, I said quietly. But I'm not here to play your villain anymore. She didn't move. For a second I thought she might yell, cry, beg, but no. She picked up her bag, adjusted her wet hoodie, and walked out like she was the one being wronged. I closed the door behind her. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I felt peace for the first time in years. The second time she came, she didn't knock. I was returning from the corner store with a coffee I didn't even want when I saw her car parked just outside the motel. Her window was cracked. She was leaning back in the driver's seat like she was on some stakeout. But this wasn't a spy movie. This was my life. And apparently she still thought she was the director. I didn't walk over. I just stared. She noticed me after a few seconds and stepped out, slamming the door a little too hard for someone who claimed she came just to talk. Her expression wasn't soft this time. It wasn't pleading. It was smug, almost amused. "Is this seriously how you're living?" she said, looking around like she just stepped into a garbage dump. "You're hiding in a motel like some rejected soap opera character." I stayed silent. Not because I didn't have words. God, I had 1,000, but because I knew what this was. She wasn't here for closure. She was here for control. She was used to winning. And my silence was the first thing she hadn't figured out how to beat. When she realized I wasn't biting, her tone changed. "You're really going to throw away everything over, what, a few texts? You're not even giving me a chance to explain to fix this?" "You already fixed it," I said. "You fixed it when you wrote my name out of your future 4 months ago." She laughed. Actually laughed. A short, bitter sound that didn't belong to the woman I used to know. "So what? Now you're the victim. Is that the story you're going with? Because I've got my own version, and people are already listening." That sentence hit like a slap, not because of what it meant, but because of how casually she said it, like it was a chess move, and she was daring me to play. I finally stepped closer, close enough to look her dead in the eyes. "You can post your story, you can write your version in glitter pens and call it poetry, but the truth doesn't need an audience." She crossed her arms, jaw tight. "You've always been dramatic, Daryl. You just hide it under that sad puppy act. You think you're deep, but really you're just exhausting." And there it was. The raw truth, not about me, but about how she always saw me. A placeholder, a backup plan, a man she could outtalk, outwit, and outlast. Someone who would always crumble under guilt while she rewrote history. She turned to leave, but paused. "You should know something," she said, her voice low. "Bo, that wasn't just some random guy. He's my boss. You leaking anything messy could cost him more than me. So just think before you try to make this ugly." I didn't reply. I didn't flinch. I just stood there and watched her walk away again. Only this time it didn't hurt. She wasn't a mystery anymore. She was just a person who traded decency for control and lost both in the process. When she drove off, I walked back into my room, shut the door, and opened the laptop. Not to fight her online, not to smear her, but to upload everything I had, records, emails, screenshots, to a secure folder my lawyer could access in case she tried anything stupid. I wasn't planning war, but I wasn't laying down either, because people like her don't come back to fix things. They come back to rewrite them, and I was done being edited. 3 weeks later, I walked past our old house. I didn't plan to. It was one of those accidental detours where your feet move faster than your brain. The blinds were drawn. The grass was taller than it used to be. Her car wasn't in the driveway. For a second, I wondered if she moved out or if the house finally felt empty without someone to dismiss. I stood across the street for a while, not hiding, just observing. And you know what I realized? I didn't feel hate, not even bitterness, just stillness, like I had finally stepped out of the noise and closed the door behind me. My lawyer called that same day. The paperwork was finalized, everything split, clean, simple. No courtroom showdown, no dramatic fights. Turns out when you stop begging to be seen, people lose their power to manipulate you. I found a small place near the water. Nothing fancy, just a one-bedroom with a crooked balcony and a landlord who remembers your name. I started drawing again. Nothing professional, just pencil sketches of quiet things, trees, hands, keys. I even sketched that broken wall clock from our hallway, frozen forever at 3:04 a.m. I pinned it to the wall as a reminder. That was the last minute I tolerated less than I deserved. One evening I got an email. No subject line, no greeting, just two sentences. I wish you would have fought for me. I didn't think you'd actually leave. I stared at it for a while, not because I wanted her back. I didn't, but because for the first time she saw me not as an option, but as someone who had a choice. I didn't reply. Some things don't deserve closure. Some endings are the closure. Instead, I poured myself a cup of coffee, stepped out onto my crooked balcony, and let the quiet in. Not the silence of resentment, not the silence of betrayal, but the silence of peace. For the first time in years, I wasn't surviving around someone else's chaos. I was building something of my own. Not because I proved her wrong, but because I finally stopped trying to prove I was enough. Thanks for staying with me until the very end of this journey. Now I'd love to hear from you. What moment in this story hit you the hardest? Was it the silence, the betrayal, or the unexpected peace at the end? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and don't forget to follow for more stories right here on Reddit Confessions.